Going far beyond simple automation, Agentic AI has the power to comprehend, reason, and act in order to accomplish complex business tasks. Joel Mickelson, Oracle NetSuite Sales Manager at Fusion 5, joins us to discuss how to safely and effectively put Agentic AI into action and make the most of NetSuite's MCP AI connector. Joel, what is Agentic AI?
Agentic AI, I think, is best described as large language models that sort of sit underpinning responses to user queries. So, large language models that then have the ability, that have agency of being able to go back into an application or a set of applications and make changes. So, if you can think about a large language model in sort of research mode, where you're sitting and chatting to it, you're asking it what a good recipe for a flan is, or what your top 10 best performing customers are. That has the ability to sort of look at natural language and reasoning and try to understand and interpret what you're saying, and then use its predefined training to come back to you with an answer. Where the agentic side comes in is when it actually has the ability then, within defined parameters normally, and recommendedly, to then go ahead and make changes to your application, to go and take action, to go and have agency over the data that it has access to. It's probably the best way I could describe that.
So, in some ways, it's like a subject matter expert because it can draw on a lot of deep information to give you good answers. But it's also like a
Yes,
personal assistant in that it can, rather than just giving you answers, it can then actually also put things into action and interact with other systems.
absolutely. So I remember the first time I heard the term agentic AI. It was a number of months ago now. So like this sort of thing is all relatively new, and the terms have been going around now for a little while. But we're only really starting to find companies now have the technology and the understanding of this to sort of think about how they want to use this technology to actually go ahead and make changes to data. Because when you think about it, there's a bit of risk that comes with agentic AI, especially if you're giving access to these agents to go ahead and make changes to your data. So you really want to make sure that you have frameworks associated with how these agents, we call them agents, how these agents can actually interact with your data, but importantly, the frameworks with which they can go ahead and make autonomous changes to that data, and whether or not the change can fit within a framework that you trust the training to go ahead and make that change without human in the loop, or whether or not human in the loop actually needs to be there as well. So a human can look at the change that the AI is proposing to make to the data and then go ahead and do that.
So it's sort of the way that you might give different human users different levels of access and the ability to
Absolutely.
read or edit. You can do the same thing with this. It's not a free for all. It can't just go and change whatever it wants to.
Yes, it can't just go ahead and change whatever it wants to, provided obviously that's the way that you've set it up. So the one thing that I would say is that um, it's great to experiment with this technology and understand how it works and understand how it goes and makes these changes. But it's really important to make sure that you've got the backing of someone that knows what they're doing, because the implications of unleashing agentic AI onto your data without the necessary frameworks and guardrails are the same as giving a brand new employee that's been in your business 2 minutes full admin level access to your ERP. You wouldn't do it to a brand new employee. And I think it's a really smart way to think about it when you're looking at agentic AI and agents that can help you with your business. You should be thinking about it the same way that you think about brand new employees that don't know anything about your business yet. They might be really, really smart at what they do, and they might be able to beat you in chess and solve the most complex mathematical equations that you can possibly think of, but that doesn't mean that they have the sense to know whether or not they should or shouldn't make a change. So you should treat these agents the same way that you would treat new employees, and make sure that they have the necessary support before they go ahead and start making changes to your data.
So one of the concepts I think behind Agentic AI is that it can learn. So when it comes to learning what it isn't allowed to do and how it interacts with your other business systems,
Yeah.
do you have to sit down and write all that out for it beforehand? Does it learn on the job, or is it sort of a mix of the two?
It can be a bit of a mix of the two. And with agents, we kind of recommend that you definitely want to give it the framework So, for example, and I'm not talking about writing technical lines of code and things like that. A perfect example would be we have agents within our business that have the ability to write scripts for us. Now, we have uploaded into the agent's memory repository the development framework that we recommend and utilize here at Fusion 5. We talk about how the code should be structured, how it should be encapsulated, how it should be deployed, and all the necessary frameworks necessary to make that code function correctly and within the parameters that we would want to define. So we created a technical document and we fed that technical document to the agent that helps us write code. And now we know, and we've tested over and over again, that the outputs we get from that agent sit within that framework. If you don't give it those guidelines, then it will go and find the best leading practices it can find. And those leading practices may or may not be compatible with what you want to achieve within your organization. So I would definitely recommend that you want to give agents some framework and some guardrails from how they should act. And you don't need to be a developer to build these within our organization across our entire sales and pre-sales and technical and contract and legal framework. We've had people in every single one of our divisions make these agents themselves without having to type a single line of code, because you're literally going and talking to this stuff using natural language, and it is actually guiding you through the creation of these agents and sort of providing some framework that you might need to guide you to make sure that you're taking into consideration all of those things that you need to make the agent successful, give you good information, and not hallucinate data.
So that's maybe a good example of a difference between agentic AI and traditional automation or robotic process automation.
Yeah.
In what other ways is agentic AI different to what's come before it?
So I think the best way to think about it is, with robotic process automation and sort of machine learning, you need to feed it enormous amounts of data in order for it to start to learn how to detect anomalies and how to work out what is correct and what is not correct. These GPT, or generic pre-trained models, have all of that training has already been done, so they know how to interpret tone, and they know how to interpret natural language, and they know how to interpret context. So they really are almost like bringing on a person that's gone through life and learn how to speak and communicate and learn how to make judgments. They don't always get judgments right, but then again, neither do people. So GPT agents have a lot of that learning that they bring to the table. So you don't need to start from scratch and have to create encoded models to do robotic process automation. And there are still some elements of business that are better suited to robotic process automation, because you need to tell it exactly what is correct and what is not correct. So these things are more, I guess, creative tasks that you will put agentic AIs to, things where you want to be able to converse with it and have it ask you additional questions, or sort of ask clarifying questions and then sort of go on. The other area which is really exciting is the ability to create automation workflows where you may have specific AIs that are absolute experts in their field. So you may have a perfect example. We had a washing machine company who they had one agent. There was a specific expert in the technical applications of how their washing machines worked. And there was one agent that was a process expert in what their warranty, return, and service processes were. And then another agent that was a technical expert in what all their current washing machines were from a specification perspective. So you could go through a workflow where you can troubleshoot a problem with your washing machine, organize a service for it, and then, if necessary, recommend a replacement based on, um, you know, the pros and cons between this model and this model. And different agents that were trained on those specific tasks would be better suited to that. And then you can have an agent that orchestrates the entire thing, like a customer service agent that calls on those agents to provide that information to a customer in a very, very specific way. So one of the big issues that we used to have when we first started adopting AI is that AI would hallucinate information.
Hmm.
And that would often be because you'd have very large amounts of context in a single string, where you'd be speaking to or you'd be speaking to a chat, it would respond to you, you would speak back to it, and it would come back to you. And every time that process happened, the entire context of that entire string would be sent to the AI processing server, and then it had a higher percentage chance of hallucinating information because it would use the information in its responses to generate additional responses back to you as well. The ability to sort of break it up into small, specific, bespoke tasks is absolutely game changing from that perspective, because it gives you the ability to ensure that the information that you're getting back from that agent is high quality and is likely to be correct and less likely to be hallucinogenic, if that makes sense.
So, looking particularly at the finance function, how can agentic AI help there?
Right. So one of the biggest use cases we're seeing at the moment is financial reporting. So one of the things that is always a big drain on people's resources is the consolidation of information from multiple systems, getting that information, interpreting it, and then writing reports, board reports, financial reports that have interpretation based on all of the available data. One of the things that Agentic AI has the ability to do is ingest large amounts of information from multiple sources and create draft documents that give people in finance the ability to start from a very, very progressed part of what they would normally have to do if they were looking at starting from scratch. And having a lot of the information in a single system can be a really good place to start from, or at least having the ability for these agents to easily connect via something like MCP to other systems to sort of grab that information in real time, interpret that information, and then create dashboards or reports or things like that, to help dramatically reduce the amount of time it takes finance professionals to build these reports.
I want to ask you about MCP in a minute, but I think this
Yep.
is a good point to ask the question that a lot of people ask. So, is agentic AI out to replace people or to assist people?
Well, there's been a number of quotes around this, and probably the quote that I like the best would be that AI will not replace people, but people who use AI will replace people that don't.
Hmm.
And it's really just like we have this conversation about AI over and over again, but what I really see AI as is electricity or infrastructure. When cloud computing first became a thing, everyone was talking about cloud computing. People sort of resisted that for quite some time. And then I think we can all agree that cloud has won the war, and people expect all applications to be delivered on the cloud these days in most circumstances. We're seeing the same thing with AI. People are talking about AI right now, and like they're talking about it as a technology, but realistically speaking, it's definitely going to be an infrastructure. So I reckon in a handful of years, a lot less time than it took us to stop talking about cloud, we won't really be talking about AI anymore. It'll just be expected that the applications that are delivered to market have the ability to be interacted with using natural language, have the ability to be intelligent, to make recommendations based on all the information that it has access to.
It's interesting that you say interacted with, because that leads us into talking about NetSuite MCP. Can you tell me what
Yeah.
that is?
So it was a really interesting because it was said by some industry commentators that NetSuite was kind of a little bit behind the eight ball when it came to um, AI and how AI had been introduced into the application. But NetSuite has been using AI in its applications for a very, very long time. It could be argued that it's probably more machine learning and sort of process automation that that was introduced into NetSuite some time ago, with the ability to look at supply chain to make intelligent recommendations. But large language model stuff started coming into NetSuite's EPM suite to sort of again, from financial reports and creating narrative reporting. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, NetSuite released an MCP connector and made it available to every single NetSuite instance. And what they effectively said is that we are now democratizing the data that sits inside your NetSuite instance. And you now have the ability using MCP. And if you think about what MCP is, most people are familiar with the term API. It's effectively a connector that gives you the ability to connect other applications to the underlying data in an application. MCP is, for all intents and purposes, an API for large language models. And NetSuite will be large language model agnostic, meaning that whatever horse you've tied yourself to, whether it's Copilot or Claude or OpenAI or Grok or whatever it happens to be, NetSuite MCP will have the ability to connect to one or more of your large language models. And effectively, what it means is that you give these agents the ability to go into your NetSuite instance and source data from any part of it. And the really interesting thing about MCP is that it is connected to a user role within NetSuite. So from a securities perspective and a permissions perspective, you can assign that user role to the agent that is associated with the person that's using it. So if that person is using an MCP connector to draw information out of NetSuite, they will only still have access to whatever they would have normally had access to in their user role. And it effectively gives you the ability to just talk to your data. You can say, NetSuite, out of my top 10 customers, can you identify if any of them haven't transacted with us in the last 90 days? And using a set of tools that NetSuite provide, and also that we have built from a Fusion 5 perspective, we've built a big framework of additional tools that can be used. The large language model, knowing what each of those tools does, will go, okay, well, based on the question that I've been asked, it would seem that this tool is going to be best. I'm going to use that tool to go and query the database to come back with that information. And if it needs to use 3 or 4 or 5 different tools to consolidate the information together to give you the report that you're looking for, it'll have that capability of doing so. As people become more familiar with MCP and the technology associated with connecting to MCP and drawing information out of those systems, we're definitely going to see things like the user interface and how data is accessed within your ERP become less important as people start to interact with the data using Teams or Slack or whatever it happens to be. They can literally go into whatever tool that they're normally used within their business to ask questions, and they may create finance agents or supply chain agents or things like that, and they'll be people within their organizations. They'll give them a name. They may call it Bill and say, "Hey, Bill, how many orders do we have to ship out by the end of the day today?" And Bill, who's an agent, will connect to the database and run a query and look at all the context of that information. And then you might ask Bill a question, is there anything that I should know? And Bill will go through and have a look and say, okay, based on the orders that you're shipping out, there's 5 orders that aren't going to be shipped out today because we're missing this product. You should go ahead and order more of that product, or think about getting one of those products flown in or expressed in, so that we can go and fulfill those other orders that that can't be fulfilled because of that issue. And as a result of that, you'll be able to deliver an extra $400,000 worth of stock by the end of the day.
So is this available to all NetSuite customers?
MCP is available to all NetSuite customers. So anybody who has a NetSuite account can turn MCP on, and then they can connect their agentic AI of choice to the MCP connector and then start interacting with that data. Now, we've been doing this now for quite some time. And obviously there are limitations, because yes, you can say, go ahead and create me a dashboard that goes and shows me all of this stuff. But if the dashboard isn't persistent and doesn't sit somewhere and you have to sort of recreate it every single time, if you're using a large language model, you might get a slightly different answer, a slightly different context, because the AI is learning all the time, as we talked about before. So as it becomes more and more aware of what you're asking for, it may give you slightly different results, which can be difficult if you're comparing one result with another. So Fusion 5 have been building out some frameworks to make that data static. So we've been building something which we call mini apps, which give you the ability to create static searches, static data sets, and static display sets, so that you can decide what it is that you want to see. You can converse with the agent and continue to ask it more about the data source that you're looking for. So you might be doing a search on supply chain, or you might be doing a search on finance, and it'll ask you what data you want to see, and you can tell it, and it will show you what it's talking about, say, that's almost right. Can you change that column name to this, or can you move that over there? And it will do all of these things in process for you. And once it has that data source right, it'll ask you how you want it to be displayed, whether or not you want it to be a portlet or a menu item or like a sublist, and then how you want it formatted. And then it will ask you how often it should need to be refreshed, or whether you need, or whether you can make changes directly in the portlet that it creates. And then you can use that mini app framework to edit the system and create your own user interface, as you, the person who's actually using the tool, want to be able to see. And you don't need to go back to a developer every single time you want a change made to it. You can literally converse with the agent and it will go ahead and make those changes for you.
You've been listening to Joel Mickelson, Oracle NetSuite Sales Manager at Fusion 5, sharing how the right guardrails can allow Agentic AI to autonomously accomplish complex business tasks. NetSuite's MCP connector ensures that NetSuite remains AI agnostic and works closely with a business's AI tools of choice. For more information on NetSuite's MCP connector, delivered by Fusion 5, please visit www.fusion5.com/netsuite or click the links in the description below.